All right, so here to my right is Kenny McDonald. He is the President and Chief Economic Officer at One Columbus, formerly Columbus 2020. He has over 20 years of regional economic development and management consulting experience. He serves as the chair of the International Economic Development Council and is also serving on numerous local boards and is a frequent speaker on the subject of regional economic competitiveness. So welcome, Kenny. And we also have Tom Walker, so CEO of Rev1 Ventures. He has built an experienced team that has invested in more than 100 startups and added more than $100 million in capital here to the Columbus region. The growth through this work has helped Columbus to be named one of the fastest growing startup cities in the US and Rev1 one of the most active VCs in the Great Lakes region. Before forming Rev1, Tom spent much of his career focused on innovation, startups, and early stage capital, first from within Battelle and then regionally in Oklahoma. So welcome, Tom. So first, I'm going to just let each of you give just a quick overview of what you do in your work at, One Columbus and Rev1, and we'll start with Kenny.
Sure. So first of all, thank you to Tom and Christy for everything they do every day and for the invitation to join them here for a series that I actually think is phenomenal that highlights the entrepreneurs and how they build the companies here, which is super. I'll back up and just say, Columbus 2020, maybe the name is familiar with to many of you, was started in 2010. I like to think of it as a 10-year project, initiative that we started that just ended, and we just under the wire we changed the name to One Columbus, kind of more of a evergreen name, so we don't have an expiration date. We do a number of things, and I'll kind of list through them really quickly. One is we're really focused on the strategy itself, the overarching economic strategy for this metropolitan area and in this community, about how it builds its economic base so that we can have healthy communities, sustainable tax base, and a thriving economy. And that takes work and a lot of intention and a lot of pulling people together. And then we deliver some services. So we certainly don't do all that work, but we think about the strategy a lot for everybody. And the services that our team of 21 people delivers every day is we're out meeting with hundreds of companies over the course of a year, locally first. So think about it as we take care of our existing accounts first, and we're focused on those companies that bring new money into the region. We call them economic-based companies, so we're not focused on a retailer in the short north or that IKEA store. We might be focused on the IKEA supplier or technology companies, things like that are in our region headquarters. And we want to know how those businesses are doing. And more importantly, we want to make them more competitive. We want to know how our city, our metropolitan area, can make them more competitive. Two is we know and embrace the fact that companies are going to fail. And that's capitalism, and that's the way our economy works. So we constantly have to be diversifying our portfolio. So just like a company would be looking at their horizon businesses, we have to be bringing new employers to the region, people putting new facilities and talent and people to work in our region. If we look across our history, we've been really successful at that. I spent a little bit of time yesterday at Honda. 40 years ago, that was a company that didn't exist here, and we take them for granted as an existing employer. All these decades later, they employ not only thousands of people in their own operation, but all these suppliers. Governor Rhodes went out and recruited them, asked them to come and be a part of this. The table was set for them. Since 2015, we've located over 115 companies to our market, just through our work and companies we work with. And they range from people bringing 15 jobs initially to massive operations investing billions of dollars. And then finally, I think a core thing of what we do is we have a comprehensive strategy, and I think a lot of communities pit entrepreneurship against what we would call traditional economic developments, a couple of things that I just talked about. This community embraces that we got to have a comprehensive strategy, and we have to have a healthy entrepreneurial environment and ecosystem if we're actually going to move the needle. So all of those things have to sort of move at the same time. Fortunately, over this last decade, a lot of that actually has moved in the right direction for this community. So those are some of the things that we do when we wake up in the morning.
Thank you. And other regions really look to what you're doing as a model for this work. So thank you.
I just a comment on that. They certainly didn't 10 years ago. Like, we weren't doing it, and we were really late to the game. We were a late entry into practicing regionalism and going to market as a metropolitan area. And it's pretty cool to now see people 10 years later actually coming in and asking us how we're doing it, because we're still pretty new to this region, how we're doing it. But it means that we've made a lot of progress, and we still have a lot to learn.
Good. Thank you. Tom, tell us about Rev1.
Perfect. Well, first, I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. So we love opening up our building to you and share stories. And Kenny, thank you for taking the time. This Rev1 story. So I've been here since 2012, and we started working with then 2020, now One Columbus Partnership, and many of our partners like Ohio State University, Nationwide Children's, and others in the region to develop a strategy on how we can support more early stage companies and startups in the region. So launched as Rev1 around 2014-ish or so, and built the team fully out by, I'd say, 2016. Made some additions over the years, but principally we have a startup studio here that comprises a lot of services to help early stage entrepreneurs. So everything from helping them find the talent that they need to grow their companies, connections to our corporate base in first customer activity, a lot of work in this facility. So in this facility we house 54 companies, something like 350 employees at any given time, and we churn this building about 40% a year. So a lot of companies coming in and moving out as they grow. We are also an investor, so we manage about $100 million of capital. We launched our first fund in 2014, and we've raised several funds since then. So we have funds that invest directly in early stage companies here that are spinning out of the Ohio State University or Nationwide Children's, or just entrepreneurs walking in off the street. And we've now invested in roughly 120 companies now in right at about 5 years. So it's been a pretty rapid pace. We manage some corporate venture funds as well. So while part of our mission is to support startups and innovators that are creating companies, the other part of our mission is how can we help our corporate base be more innovative. So, our big focus is we want to spotlight on Central Ohio as one of the most innovative regions in the country. And then the big overarching role for me is working with Kenny and our partners at the research institutions and other corporate partners in the region on what's the long-term strategy for startups and innovation in the region. And it's a really integrated model, which is something I'm really proud of, about how many people are at the table and really thinking about the future in a very aspirational way here.
Well, thank you. Well, you both came here from other parts of the country, and what drew you here? We'll start with Tom.
Well, I was dragged here. I was recruited, and at first, it wasn't, leaving Oklahoma where my family wasn't, it just wasn't on my radar screen. Had a successful career. I was enjoying myself, and I finally came out and met several corporate leaders, one of which was Kenny. He could have done a better job in that first meeting, but no, but
despite that,
yeah. What attracted me was the leaders that I met with and the way they talked about Columbus. Everything was very aspirational. Everyone believed that the best days of Columbus were ahead. And on the flight back home, that's what resonated with me. It was like, wow, this is a place that you could have a lot of fun for a long time. And just the assets that are in the region with the Ohio State University, Ohio's Nationwide Children's, and just the large corporate base. For someone in my career field, it seemed like a kid in a candy store. And so I was really attracted to the opportunity and those people that I met.
What about you, Kenny?
Where did I come from? So I've lived in lots of different parts of the country. I'm from out west in Montana, Tom's favorite place. He loves it a lot more than Oklahoma now. Better fishing. And I went to graduate school in Georgia, and I ended up actually starting my career in economic development in Savannah, Georgia, a great city, and got to learn a ton by working with a private development group in Savannah, Georgia. Got exposed to some stuff. I was very young in my career. Got to build industrial parks and do some cool things around the world. Joined a consulting firm in Greenville, South Carolina, one of the bigger engineering firms in the world, Floor Daniel, and actually helped for 8 years move companies around the world and worked on what is now the other side of the business from where I am now, which is helping companies evaluate communities, countries, states, negotiate their incentives, and really became a true believer in the power of location to impact the bottom line of a business. Where their talent comes from, how they serve their customers, the finances, the profitability of a company is all not completely dictated, but it's certainly influenced greatly by where they are in the world. Wanted to get on the other side of that again, and I did so in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Then for 8 years in Charlotte, North Carolina, a 16-county region, a great part of the country, a booming city. And much like Tom, when I came here, not reluctantly, but I initially thought, this is a place that's had its stops and starts and has continued to study things, but it's never kind of got the planes off the runway. The leaders that I met with in 2010 they were done with that. They were ready to go. They had a bias for action. They were extremely involved in the community. They remain so 10 years later. Corporate community is organized and intentional about how they do things. And Columbus at that time, I thought, was like an undervalued company. Was, a product that had enormous assets that weren't being activated, levers to pull that weren't being pulled, and generally low-hanging fruit given the assets with the Ohio State and the location in the world and the size of the community and everything else. And so for me professionally, that's what mattered. To our family, what mattered is once you put your feet on the ground, have an experience like many people in the room. It has a great impact on you. This is quite a place, but you still have to kind of come here and see it and kind of be on the streets a little, maybe a few hours or maybe a week or so, and then you see, all those things that I just talked about, and then you also see the authenticity of the city and stuff, and you can get pretty fired up about it. So that's how we came here.
Well, so you've seen a lot, both of you, in your careers, and now you've been in Columbus for a while. What excites you personally? What gets you out of bed every day to continue doing the work you're doing? We'll start with Kenny.
Well, I'll just, initially it was, look, we were at the end of a recession. You had an everyday motivation of reading about a financial crisis and people's lives being turned upside down by a financial crisis, a housing crisis, and there was unbelievable urgency when we started the organization. Right? And that motivated us for a long time. And then I'm motivated by helping clients. Like I have to lead a team. I have to do lots of things in my role. And I don't work with clients as much as I used to, but that's still the thing that makes that's the thing that gets me really excited. Because where I see that we can really help a company, today we had an Italian company in town, first U.S. facility. Right? Big, huge step for them. Can we help them do that? Right? And in fact, when you see planets align and it is the right location or is a palatable location for them, how can our services really help them do that and make an impact on people's lives? And what's motivated maybe at the start of this decade is the unfinished work. Right? So all the growth is fantastic. We're going to remain really focused on that. The unfinished work and the credibility of our platform now, I think, can actually close other gaps. So inequities that we have in health and education and transit and housing, and the wealth gap that we have in parts of our community, rural and urban, that's unfinished work that we're going to have to do a different way, engage other partners, be a lot more intentional about that. while still doing all the other stuff that, keeps the money flowing into the community and sort of that success train running. So we're probably more fired up now than we have been in quite some time. And by the way, it won't go smoothly every day. We're going to have companies that, again, fail. We're going to have major employers in our community go in the other direction. I feel like our work is more necessary today than ever before, and we're going to have to innovate and do it differently.
Well, I can't wait to get where we start talking about the future, but Tom, what gets you going every morning?
Well, I was sitting here thinking about how long I've been in this business. So I'm approaching 30 years in the innovation world, and the people you work with, and whether it's an innovator or an entrepreneur, they are very passionate people, and that's really exciting to be able to come in and work with those kind of individuals. And then the team we've assembled are really the same way. The kind of work that it takes to inspire and help some of those individuals reach their success is pretty fulfilling. For me, at the end of the day, though, the work we do is changing people's lives. I remember one of the first investments I made where the company became a success and they returned capital, and the founder called me and told me how much money he had in his bank account and, how that was going to change, his family and his friends' lives. And I saw him go on to do things in his community that were really spectacular in terms of change. So the people we help, we're helping them change their lives. They in turn change our community. And so for me, it's that connection. I love I can look across our community today and know the impact that some individuals that have come through our work, maybe they've created wealth for their families, but you see how they use that wealth in our community and make our community a better place. That's what makes me excited every day.
Well, then this may seem like a similar question, but if you look at just the work you've done in your work in Columbus, what would you each point to as your biggest accomplishments from your organizations?
Oh, that's an unfair question. Let's see. The biggest accomplishment. Well, while there was a lot of aspiration of building and impacting the startup ecosystem in Columbus, there was a lot of doubts in terms of could we do it at scale. And I remember the first seed fund we were raising in 2014. Our goal was $7 million fund. We raised $7 million. 5 years later, we have $100 million under management. So to think that this community could cobble together that amount of capital to support entrepreneurs at the riskiest and early stage, that's a pretty big accomplishment, and we didn't do it alone, and I'm quite proud of that. But now we've invested in 120 companies, so that part was a bit of an unknown. Was the deal flow going to be here? Were there quality entrepreneurs, quality opportunities? And there really is, and so quite proud of that. And I'm proud of the team that we assembled. So if you're starting a company like Rev1, you need a team of professionals to help you do that. And a lot of the things that we are encountering and striving to do has not been done at scale here. And so to attract people to that endeavor is pretty exciting. But if you step back a moment and now look at what is happening with commercialization at The Ohio State University and Nationwide Children's, it feels like to me that we've all been doing this at the same time, and you're starting to really see the successes of that. So you look across the community, the innovation community, and there's just a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, I'll jump in where Tom left off. I think internally, like to the organization, it was me and a laptop initially in a conference room, and before we hired anybody officially for Columbus 2020, and that team has largely stayed intact for almost 10 years. Like there's a few exceptions, but for the most part, we just had a young lady took a job this last week, and she'd been with us 9.5 years. She was one of our very first employees, and that's so much fun. Like I try to do things to recapture that spirit. So if you're working in a startup, I mean, as stressful and as crazy as that is, that's like, embrace it because it's so much fun. I think of all that stupid stuff we did when we started, and we're not big anymore, but we're established and we have ways of doing things and employee handbooks and all this stuff, So the team, great people I get to work with, and the passion that they have is a pretty big deal for me. And then I just would it's not a particular client. It's the transformation of almost anywhere I go in the region has been either transformed a bit or a whole lot, right? But there's been movement in almost every part of the community. Something has happened. So there's been a lot of broken windows fixed. There's been some really big stuff in communities that are almost unrecognizable with some of the development that's happened. I was just spending the afternoon with all the officials from Delaware County, and while that's had a lot of fast growth, I mean, it's exploded. And so it's really cool to see some of that stuff, and that, as you drive around and see that, is it heartens you that on the aggregate you're really making a difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of unfinished business. So when you look out 5-10 years from now, what do you both see as sort of the vision for your work in this community?
Well, we spent the last 15 months building a new strategy, and I'm going to nauseate everybody with this vision, but I'm going to keep talking about it. And that, we've come an enormous way. In fact, I'll give a presentation tomorrow where I have a bunch of pictures from the 1920s, and I have a picture of the airport terminal being built, and the steel going up at Ohio Stadium, and trolley cars running down High Street, with a city that had just been named the capital 4 years prior to that in 1916. We have, we stand on the shoulders of a lot of people, but we're now in a position to sort of boldly say we think this could be the most prosperous place in the country. And a lot of people have led us to this. It hasn't just been the last decade or something. That's been a long time coming. But we're in a position with the assets and tools and people in place, and scale as a community, that we can now say we can grow aggressively, perhaps even wildly, and we can also do things that are historically different from other parts of the country by closing gaps, making and reducing inequities that you see exploding in some cities that are experiencing huge growth, and not addressing those. And to me, that's a big deal. So being the most prosperous place in the country would mean that we're growing, but we're solving a lot of other problems, and people aren't coming just to talk to ask Tom how he's doing, what he's doing with his organization, or how the community is doing this or that, but they're saying, how in the world is the entire community doing this? How's the whole system working together to accomplish this, and reducing some of these things and creating real wealth in communities that haven't had it for decades or perhaps ever in our community, at the same time that we're growing the top end of things, right? So that's what lies ahead of us, is a really bold opportunity to do things that are historically different from almost everyone else in the country.
Mm-hmm. It's exciting.
Well, so I always like to think about what the steady state is right now, and make sure we don't take that for granted. So when you leave this evening, look at our funding wall right at the entryway, and look at the plaques on that wall of all the partners that are helping us do this work. Many of them are in the room tonight. The Columbus Foundation is here, the university's here, a lot of corporate partners are here. So we have something like 40 corporate partners, community partners, cities that are behind this effort, and they push us. But they're also there and part of the vision. So that's today. 7 years ago, that list didn't exist. So they're all part of this. And when we think about the future, and we think about what's been accomplished now, with Columbus being ranked as one of the fastest growing startup communities in the country, we think about place a lot. So we still need to invest in our infrastructure here. We don't have the right infrastructure to grow retain the kinds of companies that are launching out of our research institutions or that are starting in garages around town. So physical infrastructure is important. We think about what the innovation district could be in terms of an iconic place that attracts people to this region to partner in innovations with our research institutions and help create startup companies. And also, we have, we've popped the balloon on what's possible in terms of raising investment capital. So you think about where we are today in the community is with the amount of investment capital that's under management. What can that look like in 10 years? Can we grow it tenfold? What we've accomplished to date. So I see a big investment in our infrastructure. I can see our partners talking to us about that. So wet labs, state-of-the-art wet labs, so our scientists that are outside of research institutions can continue to grow the science that is changing people's lives, and other kinds of physical infrastructure that are going to attract the kinds of talent we're going to need to continue to help this community grow.
So both very bold vision for the future. What are the hurdles that you think might get in the way of that, Tom?
Capital, human capital, and hard cash capital. Those are really our biggest challenges, I think, in the region. The talent piece is an interesting one. I think this is one where Columbus can win. We're one of the fastest growing communities in the Midwest. So the more that we can attract a diverse talent and be very inclusive in the way we attract that talent, I think Columbus can win. So think about all the industries that are starting today and where some of the talent gaps are, whether it's in software IT or whether it's in health sciences. Let's attract the most diverse talent that we can find in the world to come here. So that's it's a gap for us on talent, but let's be really pointed about the way we go about it. And then just the hard cash to solve some of these problems. The kinds of infrastructure we need it's probably close to $100 million challenge for us all. Probably in the greater context of other challenges, that doesn't seem like a lot, but as a small nonprofit, how do we tackle some of those goals?
I think we're only limited by how we limit ourselves and the goals that we place as a community. And as I think about even this year, I'm not predicting a recession or anything, but we will get punched in the gut a few times. We're going to have 50% of the Fortune 500 turns over every 10 years. We have 14 Fortune 1000 companies that live and breathe in our region every day, and we can't count on them to be who they are today and employ the thousands of people in the same way that they do today 10 years from now. And so I think what I worry about a little bit is, are we going to stay steady, or are we going to actually hold on to that vision as, we read a bad story in the newspaper, if anybody still reads the newspaper. If you look on your screen and you read the paper. But if you hear a bad story, if something goes wrong, are we going to say, yeah, well, Columbus had its run, that was pretty cool, but let's start shrinking the pie, and I'm going to hang on and get a little parochial about my piece of the pie. The last 10 years, this community's done a great job of saying it's going to get better, we're going to continue to grow the pie. A lot of people can win, a lot of people get on the train. We are an open community in almost every respect. We've got to hang on to that really dearly, because that's where momentum will come from, right? It's going to come from people hanging on to a vision and then new players coming in with new energy, whether that's an entrepreneur walking into Tom's door, a CEO taking over one of our major companies from afar that sees what we don't see about our own community, and pushing the community further and further. If we do that, and by the way, we hold ourselves accountable, You know, all of those leaders in the 1920s that built our airport and built the Levesque Tower, the 5th tallest building in the country at that time, did all these great things. What are we going to say we did with the 20s? Right? So we're in those seats now. Are we going to be bold and push ourselves to take the risks and do the work? Right? As Tom would say, do the work and keep pouring in the capital to make these things happen. So to me, it's more of our willingness to push forward and to cling to really big ideas and not be complacent about what we have, which is super right now.
Well, this is a little off script, but it came to me as you were talking. Both of you have talked really extensively in the past about, what drew you here and the connectivity and the assets. And now that you've been here and you see how those play into helping these visions that you've had to become reality, what would you say are the things that make this community different and why you've been able to, both of you, connect a lot of these assets to do the work that you do? What's different about Columbus?
Well, first of all, it does have what every community that doesn't have it wants, which is that major university right across the river here. If we could start an economy from scratch, we would want to put a major talent factory right in the middle of the city and build around it. And we've had that for a long, long time. Are we going to, fully leverage that? So that is absolutely fantastic. And we have 12 other colleges and universities across our 11 counties that make up another, double that enrollment of college students that we have in the region. That's a really good starting place because talent is pretty much everything in every industry right now. Two is we're in the right part of the world, right? So we can get everywhere. We're still in the best part of the best country in the world. The Italian company that came in today, the companies that continue to look to the U.S. To invest in are coming here for a reason. Huge markets, protection of laws around them, great demographics for the future, and all kinds of entrepreneur spirit wrapped around you and great organizations like this to help you do it. That's embraced and you can do that, and that's still true in the U.S. And finally, we're a very good value. Like, we're a major city, we have all these assets, we're affordable, and we're really easy. We should be an easy place to live and work. And relatively, even though our commutes might be getting a little longer and our housing prices might be going up a little bit, relatively, we've got it good. Now, we've got to work to maintain that and be intentional about that. But if we remain, a good value, we leverage our access to the world, and we keep developing talent and embrace the talent we have, that's a really good starting point, right? And it's kind of basics of it, but that's why people locate places, those three reasons.
Yeah. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I'll add, a word I use a lot is collaborative. This is a really collaborative city and region, and maybe the word's overused, but when you look at the number of headquarter companies that are in Columbus, many of those CEOs aren't from here. So there is something about that environment. Same with the university. Think about all the talent that is being attracted here that that's not from here. It creates this collaborative environment that is aspiring to do more and to work together. That's certainly helped us. So I think it's a real ingredient in our water. How do we harness that? I think for the future, so we're not complacent about the success that we've had, and build on that and be patient for some of these successes that are going to come, years from now.
So both organizations have very specific focus on attracting and building high growth firms. How do the two organizations partner together and collaborate to do that?
Way more than you could imagine. So our team is with Christy and Tom all the time. I think when I talk about this piece of the economy, the way I think about it is we want to have a continuum of economic development services from the time an entrepreneur has an idea and walks in the door here or somewhere else in the community, whether that's starting a small business and getting small business financing from something that maybe they start as a lifestyle business and are progressing in a different route. But we are giving them services all the way to them being as big and as powerful as, you know, a Fortune 500 company. Are we the kind of system that actually can stick with somebody the entire time? Most communities aren't, right? Like Charlotte that's a big company town, giant banking headquarters, you know, very much organized around the larger companies and things like that, and not a lot of infrastructure. Certainly nothing like Rev1 at all. Like, and I'm not even knocking them. It's just the wiring of the place. Albuquerque, New Mexico, it was literally all about university spinouts, startups, and defense jobs coming out of Sandia and things like that, almost completely. And big companies were a foreign concept. And this community actually has both things. And we've got to work to nurture that. So our teams are working together constantly. And again, I just want those companies to have different services all the way through their life cycle. And they need capital all the way through their life cycle from different sources. They need different infrastructure. Are we going to be able to deliver that?
Yeah, there really are only a handful of communities in the country that have a comprehensive economic development strategy that includes everything from how do you help the big companies to the small companies. It is one of the things that attracted me because when I remember when I met with Kenny, he said, "We're going to help you." You know, so nothing that any of us do here is in a silo, and so it's a huge benefit to really build those strategies together and work with our communities as well as the state as partners on how we drive, you know, our certain element of economic development. So
I think what I actually said is, you look like you need help.
yeah, it was something more like that. What I was going to say is, yes, Kenny does have my cell phone, unfortunately. Yes.
The weekend texts. Well, you know, what can this group here or the community at large do to better help advocate for or help the work to grow the innovation economy in our region? People always want to know, how can I help?
Well, I always say it's not somebody else's job. You know, having a great community, succeeding in economic development is 100% all of us, right? We have professional jobs and organizations that, you know, are invested in, and we have a mission to do that. But it's everybody in the community's job to be an advocate and be a dot connector, because, you know, our teams are really small, and we're only going to get to so many people. We're completely dependent on the community also being out on the streets and having their radar up, or be willing to talk to that person that you're sitting next to in the airplane about some of the things that exist here. Right? And it's not exactly serendipity when communities do that. When communities are staunch advocates and they're intentional about saying, no, if you're running a business, I mean, you should look at our community. If you want to start a business, you should look at our community. If you're a minority entrepreneur, we've got things that other communities don't have. You should get here. Right? And let me connect you, and I'll send an email. I'll do that. That can happen from anybody in the community, and we start all thinking about that. Where we fail is we say, the community should really do that. Somebody should really do that, right? And then I catch myself doing that occasionally, and I say, well, yeah.
We are the community.
We got to do that, right? So I think to me, it's just my ask is for everybody to keep their radar on, their antenna up for opportunities, and don't be shy about sharing how this is a great place to do business, to live, to achieve your dreams.
Yeah, I'll just build on that. There's a lot of ways to be involved. This is a team sport. Now, for our business, I'm looking out in the audience, and I recognize a lot of faces, so I know a lot of you are involved in your own way, and keep that up, because some of the things we're working towards, how do we impact the risk tolerance of our community? And our community is made up of corporations and individuals, so we're still Midwesterners at heart. We're fairly risk averse. So ask yourself, if you're in a company, how does your company help little companies? Because that is a risk area. Or how are you personally getting involved, and how can you spread the message? Those things are really important, because what we're working towards is continuing this evolution of our culture to help start more, in our case, more risk-based companies. There's not a company we help start that's bankable, and it takes them 5-10 years to be bankable. And one of the things I'm proud of is we have banks as partners. They know that I may not introduce them to a company that they can have business with for some time, but they're taking that risk to start those relationships now. So that example, use that in your own day-to-day life, and how can we continue to push the culture forward.
Well, thank you. I think it's the time to open up to questions from the group. Is Shannon coming around with the? All right. All right. So just raise your hand if you have a question. Test.
Thank you. Hold on. Rules of the road here. Use the microphone.
Introduce yourself first.
Hi, Doug Kreidler, Columbus Foundation. When you are out in the world or around the U.S., what's consistently the most surprising thing that someone that doesn't know anything about Columbus is told and is astonished by?
Usually you have to describe where it is located, where we're located. You get past that. Talking about what we're all engaged in, some of the successes and the accomplishments, it's usually a commercial that they've just not heard. The assets that are here, the size of the city, how fast we're growing, where we rank in the U.S., unknown. And that, this is a place to really thrive. When we're recruiting people to the community, you can recruit software engineers. They can come here, they're meeting with XYZ company, and there are enough companies like that now that they know if this one doesn't work out, I have plenty of opportunities. So I just think that the breadth of the opportunities here and the overall commercial, we still need to do a better job of how we get that message out.
I would agree with all that. I would also add that, we take it for granted, but a lot of people we meet with don't know that the Ohio State University is even here, right? And we think, oh my God, of course they know that, right? But they don't, and they may not know the scale of both the city and the university and the marriage of that, and what it can bring to them. And the final thing is they don't quite understand the diversity of the community, that is actually fueled by our university and stuff, but also the diversity of our economy. I think a lot of people, maybe they had a job opportunity here, or they've been introduced to something from one of our great companies, but they don't know that they could actually work in 10 more. They think that literally that's nationwide, everybody works for Nationwide. Well, great company, but that's not true. And there's other opportunities for people at Chase and startups and all kinds of things. Once they learn about that and you peel back things, it gets pretty interesting.
We've got a question right here.
Hi, this is Vinita Mehra from Keg LeBron. I have a question for Tom and then for Kenny. Tom, you mentioned something about how important it is to have workforce from a diverse culture to fill in the gap that we experience. How do you handle the challenge of not finding that workforce or not able to get that workforce because of the limitation and restrictions we have in our immigration policies? Because both cannot go together, and I know Kenny's smiling about it. He knows my feelings about it. How do you handle that? Because that's going to be a big impediment to growth, and the gap is going to get bigger and bigger in the coming years.
It is, and we have been encountering that in full force here the last couple of years. We have a terrific team member from China on our team, and she went home to visit her family, and then she couldn't come back for a period of time. So there's a lot of new challenges that are on top of sort of the existing challenges, and I'm not sure any of us have the answer to that, but we can't give up. We can't just ignore that part of the population that wants to, that's diverse and wants to come to our community. So we engage legal counsel, as you know, to help us work through those things. And, we encourage our other corporate partners to think the same way. If it's an added initial expense and, up front, bear the expense. Let's get the talent here.
One core belief is that we believe very much in the power of cities, right? So I mentioned before that we have and I truly believe this, we have the best country in the world for business. We've not only changed our own country, from an idea to where we are today, but we've changed the world through those ideas, and by being open, and we're still a great place. But we do some things that make it sometimes surprising that we're the cleanest shirt in the laundry around the world, and so we have some real challenges. I think cities can lead, though. I think metropolitan areas, where 90% of the activity in the world, economic activity in the world is, cities have to lead and be open places and embrace that diversity and show the way, perhaps for national policy and things like that, to unleash all of the strengths of the country and all of the people that could come here from around the world, that start companies and work inside of our companies and lead companies and quite frankly, lead our civic organizations in our cities and stuff as well. So again, we have to continue to practice and take a slant towards being more open to more things all the time than other places who are perhaps closing their doors.
And Kenny, one question for you. Yes. No. Oh, hold on. I thought you wanted to. Okay. When we travel internationally, and you've experienced that, when people ask about Columbus, at least as a professional, and when I'm talking to other companies, be it India, China, wherever, the first question I've been asked is, how do we get there? Are there any direct flights? And that I do realize sometimes is a difficult conversation to have. To say, you come to New York, then New York to come to Columbus, or you go to Chicago, or go to Detroit. I know the airport authority has done a great job in the last few years, but what are we going to do to change all of that so that we can start saying, yes, there's a direct flight to get to Columbus and to do your business?
Well, and I have to tell Vanita, we have the same number of flights to India that Austin, Texas, and Nashville do. So I think we have to continue to grow. We have to continue to grow, be successful, be engaged, and connect to the world. And those opportunities won't just be handed to us. We're still have to go get them, earn them, all those things. But actually, a lot's being done. Like, we're constantly meeting with the airlines, and our city is right there. We continue to grow, be successful. We're going to continue to have great opportunities and close some of those gaps, particularly international flights.
Hello, Ron Sachs. My question is kind of building on your response to Doug's question. You talked about being surprised that when you encounter people outside that don't really know very much about this. And I'm just wondering from both of you, what is being done to externally tell Columbus's story?
We actually do more marketing than people understand, but we do it in a very targeted way. And so a lot of the community people wouldn't see our marketing around the country and around the world. I think by equipping our leaders and equipping people to go talk around the world, so as not just the mayor of Columbus, but the mayor of all these communities that call the Columbus region home, to have the president of the university and leaders of civic organizations go tell the story of the community around the world as they're on stages, around the world is an important thing. And maybe just kind of a slight twist on that. I'm never concerned. There's a lot of people who didn't know where Charlotte, North Carolina was either. And that didn't bother me. It bothers me when I meet somebody from our own community that doesn't know what's going on and the great assets that we have here. So I probably think more about that and say, we do have to continually do a great job of marketing and telling our own leaders, but in particularly our young people, about the great opportunity that exists right here and all the paths that they can take for a career or to start a company that exists, 30 minutes from their doorstep. And to me, that's just as important as marketing, anywhere in the world.
We do a lot of marketing targeted in our industry outside of Ohio. In fact, Christy and Heather lead that for us. I don't know how many national tech publications were we in last year?
Oh, I think we had 22 articles and 200 million media impressions. That's not right,
And,
Heather?
and the storytelling for us
More than
is,
that, 250 maybe.
Yeah, the storytelling for us in that is really important. So telling the stories of the companies, and that really helps attract other investors, who, whether they're in the Valley or other spots in the U.S. where there's more capital than we have here. So.
We had a question over here. Yeah.
Hi, Christian Bede with Wells Fargo Private Bank. I'm not from Columbus, but I've been here 4 years, and I've been bi-coastal, grew up in a small island. So I'm kind of curious from both of you, not being from here, what tips do you have for people to make those connections, to sort of get engaged in that collaborativeness that we keep hearing about? And maybe Tom, as an allocator, curious about, are you reaching the tipping point where eyeballs are really looking at Columbus, maybe even Rev1, to really snowball the capital raising aspect of innovation?
Well, I'll take and I'll go in reverse order there on your questions. It's a lot different today than it was, 8 years ago, without a doubt. And I think the success of some of the companies who have either exited or gone on to raise additional capital has really helped, because it's brought some of those eyeballs to our town to see what's going on. There's also new funds that have started, since we've been here. So, the work that Drive Capital has done to put the eyeballs on the Midwest and Columbus in that investment world has been huge. So there's a lot happening. I still think that it's still a tough region of the country to raise capital. We're out working on a new fund, or will be in the coming months. And my preliminary conversations it's still tough. We're still sort of a risk averse. So, what are some of those strategies? You blanket your local region as much as you can, and how much can you go outside of this region where perhaps some of the capital travels more? In terms of helping those that aren't from Columbus to collaborate, you can look at our organizations. We both do different things, and then there are a lot of other organizations that conduct networking, the university and others. We do things like this. We usually do this over a lunch period, over lunchtime, not lunch period like we're in school. I miss those days. But usually 100 to 200 people, a lot of different folks, and it's terrific networking. We do different things in the evenings as well, so I'd encourage you to look at our website and sign up for a newsletter. And we promote not just our events, but others around the community, because there's a meetup just about every night around town.
Do we have time for one more question?
All right, last one.
Glenn Gardner of the Vortex Group. I'm an executive search firm. We've placed technology commercialization people at The Ohio State University and Nationwide Children's Hospital. And the words I'm trying to hear about more are gene therapy and what can you do to bring the life sciences more here, because we're a very established software and services town, and the life sciences seem to be on an exponential rise.
Well, it's the next frontier for Columbus. Quietly, we've invested in 4 gene therapy companies right here. They've all spun out from our research institutions, and the talent that our research institutions have attracted here to work in those areas are world-class, just absolutely world-class. So this gentleman's question in the back, what eyeballs are really looking at us, gene therapy, life sciences in general, which is why I had the comments around investing in that kind of infrastructure, because we need to, we have the infrastructure to attract those folks to the institutions, but we need the infrastructure to retain them as they spin out of those institutions.
I'll just expand on that. I mean, that actually is not just an emerging sector for us, but going to be a really core sector for the entire region, and something that really didn't exist in a core way 10 years ago. And then I would also, keep expanding our minds around these things. So, we've been convening an esports group. We're studying, how the billions of dollars that are being spent in something like that, what kind of companies are we going to have in that? Are there big companies that exist today? Where are they going to allocate their people? There's going to be all kinds of things like that merge over this decade that maybe we're thinking about or not thinking about now. And we have got to stay really present, not just in our own community, but around the world, paying attention to how we position our entrepreneurs, our companies, our communities to benefit from these horizon type of industries constantly.
All right, well, I think we are at the 6 o'clock mark. So before I hand it back over to Heather, she has a few remarks. I do want to give a big round of applause to Kenny and Tom. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.